Hey guys, welcome back to Lit Sports Online. We're talking about some professional fighting news once again. In this episode, we're going to be going over the main event for UFC 234, a review of that main event. We're also going to be talking about the upcoming UFC on ESPN event, Ngannou versus Velasquez. But before we get into that, we got Gervonta Davis, the local Baltimore boxer, actually won his most recent fight.
Yeah, so Javante Davis won his fight in the first round last weekend against Hugo Ruiz. He just overpowered Ruiz. I think he broke his nose early in the fight and then landed a quick combination at the end, landed a big right hook over the shoulder of Ruiz, caught him right on the back of the chin. After having a broken nose, it was just too much for Ruiz to take. He looked like he was going to be okay for a second, then he kind of went down and the ref, stood him up, asked him if he was all right to continue. Ruiz didn't really respond, and the ref called the fight off with 1 second to end the round. And so Gervonta Davis got his 20th knockout win in 21 fights.
That's a hell of a way to keep your career moving in boxing, and it's just going to be interesting to see who he defends his title against next.
Yeah, he'll probably go against his original opponent, Abner Mares, but we'll see what happens. He's Floyd Mayweather's protege, sort of, so it's a good way to start off your career, especially if you're chasing that Floyd Mayweather record of 50-0. 21-0 with 20 knockouts is not a bad way to start it.
Yeah, well, ambitious goal. We'll see if he gets anywhere close to that. So, moving along, we're going to go ahead and recap the UFC 234 main event. It was Israel Adesanya against Anderson Silva. Of course, I'm sure pretty much everyone knows who Anderson Silva is. But Israel Adesanya, it remains undefeated in MMA after this fight as he won by decision.
Yes, he beat the man who inspired him to start fighting. As we said in the preview video, Adesanya was a kid who watched Anderson Silva, and in his words, he had never realized that a skinny black dude could come up and beat everybody's ass until he saw Anderson Silva, who made everybody look like a fool. And so, unsurprisingly, his style is kind of similar to Anderson Silva's. He fights at a long range. He has a very long reach compared to most of the people in his weight class. And so he likes to use a diverse striking set and counter-striking and good timing to beat his opponents. And it was an interesting fight to see two guys with similar styles, because it was fun to watch at different moments each guy be kind of forced into fighting a fight that they wouldn't normally fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At times, Adesanya was patient enough that Anderson Silva had no choice but to come forward. And at times, Adesanya was putting on more pressure than we've seen him put on other guys. And so we saw a lot of really, really varied striking. We saw some things that I hadn't seen in fights before, actually. We saw Anderson Silva check a kick in a really weird way, where instead of picking up his knee and checking the kick with his shin bone, he kind of turned his hips over and kind of took the kick on the top of the thigh and kind of forced the kick up, which I thought was actually really interesting. I've never seen anybody check a kick that way. It was a really creative way to divert what would otherwise be a really strong technique from Adesanya, because he has very long legs, so his leg kicks are really hard. And we'd seen him land a couple of big leg kicks in the fight against Silva already, and he actually later buckled him with one in the third round. Then we also saw Anderson Silva throwing a lot of spinning heel kicks to the calf of Adesanya and to the legs, which was interesting. You don't often see people throw spinning back kicks to the lower body, but it was a fun fight in the sense that there was just a ton of creativity. Nobody really went for a takedown. We just, like I said, a lot of diverse striking, a lot of striking at range. Both guys landed a couple big shots, but neither guy was able to completely outclass the other guy. But Adesanya was definitely more effective. He was faster. His timing was a little bit better. His reach was longer, so he was able to control where the fight happened more. And he just caught Silva. Silva was waiting, I think, a little too much for Adesanya, and was too dependent on it being a counter-striking game, and was letting Adesanya get his strikes off without really getting out of the way and having an effective counter.
Well, I guess this is kind of a continuation of a theme we've been seeing with the mixed martial arts lately, because you see all these matchups between veterans and younger guys, and a lot of times you see the youth prevailing simply because, hey, I mean they're closer in their prime, got better reactions and whatnot. And so a lot of times you see youth prevailing, but it's really interesting how these two guys matched up with one kind of being inspired by the other, and Anderson Silva still fighting into his 40s.
Yeah, definitely. It's a story that happens over time and time again, and it's an interesting time for MMA as a relatively young sport in that we still have some of these guys who are like some of the original legends. Anderson Silva, like the legend of Anderson Silva, started in like 14, 15 years ago when he started his title reign. He's the Anderson Silva of old is like this weird mythical MMA creature that just dismantled people, and it's interesting that we see him still in the ring or in the octagon and fighting guys that, like you said, were brought up on Anderson Silva and are emulating him. So we see that matchup over and over again, and I think we're always going to see it, but I think right now is an interesting time where we still see these legends still there: Vitor, Anderson Silva, Chuck Liddell, things like that. So pretty soon those guys will be gone, but then we'll be looking at a new crop of the older fighters. Eventually Rockhold and Weidman are going to be the guys that are the older guys instead of Silva and Shogun.
Moving along to our preview section of the episode, where we're doing a preview again. This is for the Ngannou versus Velasquez. It's coming up on ESPN.
Yes.
And so, there's a couple fights here that are really worth talking about. So we'll start with a featherweight matchup where we got Alex Caceres against Kron Gracie.
Yeah, this fight is exciting for a couple reasons. First, Alex Caceres is just an exciting fighter. He's a guy who likes to fight in standing at range. He throws a lot of flashy kicking techniques. His nickname is Bruce Leroy. He likes to walk out in the classic yellow Bruce Lee jumpsuit and all this stuff, and big afro, and he's just an entertaining guy. He was on The Ultimate Fighter, so his personality is pretty jovial, and he's a fun guy to watch and a fun personality. But what I'm really excited for is Kron Gracie coming into the UFC. Anytime the Gracie name is attached to anything, it's gold in the MMA and just martial arts community. And I mean, they're the ones who started the UFC, and so we now have a Gracie in the UFC for the first time in a little while. And Kron Gracie is a very, very exciting fighter. His stand up is coming along, but his ground game is incredible. He's a phenomenal submission artist, just like anyone in the Gracie family. They're known for jiu-jitsu. They essentially made jiu-jitsu what it is in the world today. And he hasn't fought in MMA since 2016, but it's just exciting to see him back in here. His name value is going to immediately make him a main card staple. He's always going to have a kind of a bigger fight. But they give him a really interesting matchup in Alex Caceres, who's a really well-rounded guy, but also has a really flashy and diverse and good striking game at range. So Kron Gracie is a grappling specialist, can submit anybody in the world, but we'll see how his stand-up game holds up against Caceres, who likes to fight at range and who is a legitimate, UFC talent. He's fought Uriah Faber before, so he's fought a higher level of guy in MMA than Kron Gracie has. So really it's a question for me of how does Kron Gracie look after so much time off of MMA, and is he able to handle the stand-up game of Alex Caceres enough to take the ground to the floor where he's going to have an advantage over almost everyone he's going to face.
Moving along to the next fight, we've got a women's strawweight matchup. Courtney Casey against Cynthia Calvillo.
Yeah, so it's a similar style fight in the sense that we have one fighter that's more primarily a stand-up fighter versus one fighter who is more of a grappler. So Courtney Casey is a taller woman with a longer reach who likes to throw a really varied striking game. She has a really good kind of American-style kickboxing game where she throws a lot of straight punches. She doesn't lean too far over her front foot. She throws a lot of kicks. She has some power in her strikes for sure. But she's fighting Cynthia Calvillo, who has a really good kind of pressure boxing, forward boxing, and dirty boxing game that she uses to get to the ground, the fight in close quarters and take people to the ground and smother them. She has a really, really good wrestling and ground and pound game and a decent submission grappling game. And so I think really it's a question of, can Courtney Casey keep the fight at range enough to kind of pick apart Cynthia Calvillo? Or is Cynthia Calvillo able to get in close enough to dirty box and drag this fight into a dirty boxing against the cage and a grappling match where she's going to be able to smother and kind of pound out Courtney Casey? So we'll see what happens. But this is definitely an interesting fight for the division because it's going to... both of these women are on the cusp of being contenders for the title. So this is going to determine kind of that middle of that division, which woman is on her way up and which woman is kind of stagnating towards the middle bottom of the upper echelon.
Okay, and then the co-main event. We got James Vick and Paul Felder. This ought to be an interesting one. What do you think?
I think this is fight of the night. Both of these guys love to just get in there and brawl. Felder has some real power. James Vick's obvious advantages are going to come from his height and his length in this fight, but he's one of those guys who has such a big reach, but for whatever reason doesn't use it particularly well. He isn't able to kind of keep people at range and keep people off of him. He likes to get in brawls more. He's got some good grappling, very well rounded, but Paul Felder is high pressure, a lot of power, and tenacious and just tough as hell. And I think this is going to be both guys walking forward and throwing as big a shots as they can. And I think that one of the things that we might see come into play is the fact that James Vick, when he's striking, when he gets in these brawls, and when he starts backing up, he tends to drop his hands and leave his chin out. He's very tall, and he stands a little tall. Like he doesn't like crouch down a lot. His stance isn't super wide, and so what happens is he puts his hands down and kind of pushes away instead of covering up when he's backing up and getting out of exchanges, and he tends to leave his chin out. He stands a little too high, leaves his chin a little too far out, and he gets caught. We saw that happen against Justin Gaethje, and I think that could be a real problem for him in this one against Paul Felder, a guy who's just got a lot of power. His last fight was at welterweight against Mike Perry, and dude broke his arm in like the first round and just kept fighting for the rest of the fight and didn't stop moving forward. So I think this is fight of the night. I think it's going to be a very exciting fight, and I don't know who's going to win, but it promises to be fireworks.
So is Felder more of a natural welterweight, or is he like coming down for lightweight?
No, Felder used to be, probably. He's probably more of a natural welterweight, but he's able to make the weight cut to lightweight. You know, when he's probably walking around outside of fight camp, in the 180s. So instead of cutting down to 150, when he's in fight camp and controls his diet real well, he's probably in, 170 or something like that. He's cutting probably 10 to 20 pounds to get down to 155. So, yeah, I would say he's a more natural welterweight, but most guys that are his size would be cutting down to lightweight because of that advantage in size you get, So it's a mixed bag, because we've seen guys like Gastelum and Whittaker, who were supposed to be the main event of last weekend until Whittaker got injured with a hernia. We've seen both those guys who used to be welterweight fighters go up to middleweight, and then they're the title fight for the middleweight title. So it's an interesting point of contention in MMA these days, and whether or not the weight cut is worth it. And we're seeing a lot of guys start to go up a weight class. I think Paul Felder is going to be one of those guys eventually. I think it won't be worth it for him to cut the weight anymore, especially because he has a career outside fighting already. He's one of the main announcers for the UFC, so he's doing ringside commentary. So he's not going to want to keep draining himself and cutting down to that extra weight class if it's going to put extra stress on his body and his mind and possibly take more damage and hurt his career after fighting.
So is he the only guy in MMA that's like an announcer while he's also fighting, or is that like a thing?
No, dude. Dominic Cruz does it. Daniel Cormier, champ, he does it. It just takes there's a few guys that do it, but it's just that personality, like some guys have it, some guys don't. We've seen people do it before, and a lot of what we're seeing the UFC do is have former fighters come in and be either desk commentators or ringside commentators. Kenny Flory, Michael Bisping, Tyron Woodley, Eve Edwards, the list goes on of guys who are now one or the other between on the desk in the studio or ringside. So it's a good way to go, I think. But still, I don't think anybody will be better than Joe Rogan, who is just, I think he's the best live fight announcer there is.
And then the main event of the night is, of course, Francis Ngannou versus Cain Velasquez. I think this is going to be a hell of a matchup. Two heavyweights that are really hard hitters, really got great records in MMA. If it's my money, I'm going to say Cain Velasquez wins this one. But Francis Ngannou, he has his good days too. So you never really know for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think I think this fight's going to go one of two ways. I think this fight is going to go the same way as either Cain versus Junior Dos Santos 1, where Junior Dos Santos caught him, landed a huge overhand right, which is the same punch that we just saw Francis Ngannou knock out Curtis Blaydes with. Or I think it's going to be Cain Velasquez versus Junior Dos Santos 2 or 3, where Cain Velasquez is just able to get inside those punches, avoid the power shots, and just completely smother and demolish Ngannou, or in those cases, Junior Dos Santos. There were some of the worst beatings I've ever seen anybody put on another human being in the cage. And I think that Cain Velasquez has a propensity to do that to Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou is a huge guy. He hits incredibly hard, has a very long reach. He's very strong. But Cain Velasquez is, skill for skill, perhaps the best heavyweight fighter of all time. Daniel Cormier, the current heavyweight champion, says that Cain Velasquez is the best heavyweight that's ever existed, and they're training partners. And that's Daniel Cormier, perhaps, one of the greatest fighters in all of MMA history. And so I think that Stipe Miocic laid out the blueprint for how to beat Francis Ngannou. I think that Cain Velasquez is a better version of Stipe Miocic. I think he doesn't quite hit as hard as Miocic, but I think that skill for skill, Velasquez is better at Miocic than ever at everything. So I think that we very, very likely have a scenario where Cain Velasquez is going to go in there. His head movement is good. His leg kicks are heavy. His body kicks are heavy. And I think that we might see him able to slip the punches of Ngannou, throw some punches of his own, get in there, and like I said earlier with the Calvillo Courtney Casey fight, I think we're going to see Velasquez turn this into a dirty, dirty fight. I think he's going to just push Ngannou the whole time, constantly move forward, get inside the range, and just clinch him, put him up against the cage, pressure him, constantly threaten with takedowns, constantly level change, just land shot after shot, take him down, ground and pound him, and maybe get the finish in like the second or third round. But conversely, if it goes Ngannou's way, it could be one of the most spectacular finishes ever, Like we saw Ngannou land that shot that turned Alistair Overeem into a Pez dispenser.
It's certainly an opportunity for Ngannou if he gets the victory here. It's a chance to show everybody, like, hey, I'm the real deal heavyweight in this division. Cain Velasquez is a guy that's, he's been around for a while, and he's a high profile guy, and he's, he's still in his prime, really. So,
you hope so. The big problem with Velasquez is his injuries. He hasn't fought very frequently because he just keeps getting injured. He's had back problems and stuff, and I think he has a metal cage around part of his spine to keep it in place. And those guys at AKA, American Kickboxing Academy, just train hard. They beat the hell out of each other in the gym, and that's why they're so good. That's why they have so many champions. Velasquez, Rockhold, Cormier, Khabib Nurmagomedov, some of the best fighters in modern history. And Yeah, this fight is really interesting because it's a very good test of where both guys are. If Velasquez comes out and gets through the most powerful, devastating, and terrifying heavyweight we've seen in a long time, and Ngannou, who has the ability to punch anything and kill it, or do we have Cain Velasquez come back and look like the absolute bulldozer that he was in his prime, when he put some of the most savage beatings on people we've ever seen, where he beat Brock Lesnar, Junior Dos Santos multiple times. He came out and just steamrolled through Antonio Bigfoot Silva. If Francis Ngannou wins, we know, yes, he's the real deal. Yes, he has shored up those holes that he had in his takedown defense and his dirty boxing and his close fighting range. And if Cain Velasquez comes out and wins, that we know he's still on the level that he used to be. He is still a very real top contender for the title. And I think that either way, the winner of this is going to go on and fight for a title their next fight, I think, without a doubt. And I don't know what's going to happen if Velasquez wins because his training partner is Daniel Cormier, so that could be a weird situation. They're not going to fight each other. So we'll see what happens, but...
Well, so what do you mean? He's just going to, not go for a title if he's offered a shot at the title?
I think what would happen is we would see Cain Velasquez not take a fight for a little bit, Daniel Cormier fight one more fight, and either go down to fight John Jones or retire. And then Velasquez could take that title back over. It's my guess. If I'm Daniel Cormier, I'm fighting Brock Lesnar or John Jones because that's the biggest payday you can get. But
it's all about the Benjamins.
It is all. It's prize fighting, That's what his coach wants him to do. Javier Mendez wants him to fight Brock Lesnar and John Jones because they're the big money fights. He wants the money. His manager wants the money. Why not? Especially when you're Daniel Cormier, you're already a champ, 2-division champion, legacy set, one of the greatest fighters of all time. Why not go for that one fight where you're going to make $10 million and call it a day when you're over 40 already?
Well, anyway, as far as this fight's concerned, I think what makes it really interesting is, yes, Cain Velasquez, he's a veteran, experienced fighter, but he's not like a BJ Penn that's on the way out type of deal. He's not an Anderson Silva that's in his 40s trying to push in the last couple fights. This guy's still skilled and ready to go. So I think it's going to be interesting. And like I said, I think I got Velasquez winning it.
I think you're right. I think really the big question is, how does he look coming off those injuries? The injuries is what's hurt him the most in his career. So as long as those injuries aren't lingering and still, hurting him in his training, then I think we're going to see Velasquez come out and look phenomenal like he has in previous fights and steamroll through Ngannou on his way to a title shot, and I think it'll be great. And real quick, just got to mention, last weekend, Robert Whittaker, Kelvin Gastelum, middleweight title fight, canceled due to Whittaker having a hernia and doctors telling him that if he got hit in the stomach hard enough, he would die. So that's why that fight that we took all that time to break down did not happen. No review. Kelvin Gastelum, super salty, walking around with a belt that he borrowed from somebody, saying that he's the new champ based on high school wrestling rules, where if a guy forfeits, you automatically win the match, which is cute. It's real cute. Get out of here with that shit.
Well, that's right. We're going to have to leave it here from Lit Sports Online, and make sure to subscribe, like our video, whether you're following us on thisislitTube.com or just on YouTube. Hey, we're here to keep putting the videos out, but thanks for watching. Who is going to challenge this guy for his title next?
I don't know. They'll probably put him against his original opponent.
Well, there's got to be some prospects on the short list here, right? Who's really gunning for the title right now?
Oh my god, dude, that's literally blowing because he's stuck in. I was like, what the fuck?
I don't know.
Justin was like, well, what do you mean?
What
do you mean?
I legitimately...
Answer me!
Dude, I don't know, man. There's so many fucking weight classes in boxing.